Welcome to Spiritual Studies Session 19. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. Throughout the course, we have teased at this subject at the beginning of religion. How did religion begin from shamanism? And mind you, if you're listening to this course alone or this session alone, it is completely independent. There's plenty to learn. You don't need to hear the rest to know what's going on. It's completely self-contained. But the subject here seems a little like there's a big distance between it's the shape-shifting, the chimeras, and the mythical creatures of the old world. In this talk, we will be explaining how that came to be, why the ancients have this preoccupation. And the big bridge to cross here is how does that translate to this discussion of the beginning of religion? And surprisingly, these two do go hand in hand. It's a natural transition. But we're going to have to, first and foremost, enter on a few different occasions throughout the session, the mentality, the mind of shamanism. And from this historical ancestral context, we will be able to understand the trajectory of human thought throughout the ages and answer many of the fundamental whys that we wonder about. So let's begin. So first, we need to talk about the shamanic journey. When children are taught about the shamanic journey in school, they think of this is taught as if it's literal, that the young person goes out into the wild, starves, maybe takes something, right? Has to survive, and somehow when they return, they know their power animal, their spirit animal. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't a literal, that this has never been a literal journey. But what I'm saying right now is that this is an internal journey. This is you being put into a trance state, putting yourself into a trance state, an assisted trance state, hypnagogic. And from this is where you learn your power animal. So it's hard to describe. It's something to experience. The trance ceremony generally will be that you will lay completely still and you are instructed with what to visualize, if you want to coin it like that. You could also interpret this as astral projection. And in the shamanic understanding of the world, as it still believes and as it still is, there is this realm, there is the lower realm, and there is the upper realm. The lower realm is not hell. There is no hell to speak of. The lower realm is where the animal spirits live. The lower realm resembles the Fey land, or a land of utopic nature, where everything is beautiful and plentiful. The upper realm, which we won't be discussing as much, is the realm of the ascended masters, or what would later be called gods. You can think of this as the intellectual spirits, maybe. And mind you, a lot of the ways that I'm describing this are rather ham-fisted, but I'm trying to give an idea to those that are unfamiliar. So an initiate is put into this trance state, is instructed in how to reach the lower realm, and here you will find your animal, the one that aligns with you. And you will dance this animal in your everyday, or not your everyday life, but in the ceremonious rituals from henceforth. The animal will show you how to dance it, and how they dance, how they move. So we're getting into nature centricism, where it's very alien to us, but the mind is completely involved with what is within nature and what is surrounding it. And animals are helping spirits. They are likened spiritual entities that express specific traits, good and bad. Now, where this is advantageous, right? So if you are having trouble with bravery, then you should dance the lion. You know, the lion is very courageous, brave. And so to bring this essence into yourself, to make the movements as the lion does, is to draw upon its strength. And this would help you gain that courage that you need. So a very practical type of relationship, if you can kind of get the hints that I'm saying here. So this is the very center of shape-shifting, or what is also referred to as skinwalking. We don't have to say literally shape-shifting, like anamorph sort of stuff. Shape-shifting, skinwalking is a way of getting to know an animal better. So if the natives needed to be more sneaky in the hunt or in a game, it would be best to dance or to imbibe an animal with stealth. If you needed strength, it would be best to, you know, dance the bear, right? That you can draw upon these things. This is what is centrally and originally meant by shape-shifting, okay? So it allows you to take on this animal form. Now, if you get on all fours and you bark like a dog and walk like a dog, act like a dog for several days, by all means, you are a dog. You have done that so much that people will even treat you like a dog. If there was a local loony that always was acting as if he was a dog, people would naturally treat him like a dog. He has imbibed, he has codified this in his mind, and this will come up later. We are what we believe, so this has a lot to do with the nature of belief here. So basically, you let yourself take on the posture of said animal, the stance, their movement, and their sound. How does this animal see? How does it smell? How does it touch? How does it taste? In itself, you know, I'm not saying like you tasting it, but you get what I mean. What is it experiencing? So you move in its way. You move in that spirit, and you are absolutely convinced. You're like an actor. You are taking on the role completely. You have forgotten your own egotism. So this is the skinwalking. And it's no surprise that, you know, shamans have been also named as and depicted as morphed with wolves and eagles, bears, you know. You walk certain animals to do certain ceremonies for healing, for protecting. So whatever you need, all the animals provide you with these attributes that you need to call into yourself. And there's no wonder here that the natives are tremendous trackers. They literally know the animal. They literally are, right? They imbibe it. So of course they can track. They know how they do. And, you know, when the natives were being, you know, persecuted and preyed upon by the settlers, they likened themselves to wolves. much in the same way as human beings have treated wolves. They felt that they were being treated in the same way as the wolf, so they imbibed the wolf, right? So just to start to, this is all just to kind of get into this early shamanic, and it's not early because it's still around, but this is the OG religion. This is the OG spirituality. So this is the headspace that we need to enter, okay? Now, when it comes to this discussion of what they call the ancestors are the spirit of all living things. So all living things have a synonymous spirit that you can imbibe. So the ancestors are all these attributes that can float through you, that can tell you things, that can give you wisdom. Now, when it comes to what this is referred to as, it's therianthropy, therianthropy, which is this term for the transformation of a human into an animal form. Now, your mind again might be thinking literal, but no, not in its original context. And we see this trope throughout the whole world. So stick with me here. In Brazil, there is the Libosmem, or the Boto, and this is a river dolphin that transforms into a boy. This is a story. This is a lore. There's also another story of a small brown bird that transforms into a boy. This is shapeshifting. This is skinwalking. In Canada and the First Nations, there's what they refer to as the bear walker, and this is a evil sorcerer who walks around in the form of a bear. Again, take it back to its original context as we're going through these. In China, there is the story of I think it's Huli Jing or Leng Ren. Leng Ren is the Chinese werewolf, and Huli Jing is a fox spirit which appears as a beautiful woman, and sometimes they are like a part of love stories, and sometimes they are something to be feared. In Ethiopia, and by extension as well, Tanzania and Morocco, you have the Buddhas, which is like Boudas, Buddhas, which is a kind of were hyena. They're sorcerers that take the form of a were hyena, which we're going to talk about this more later, this werewolf, were hyena phenomena. The Buddhist has the power of the evil eye, and this individual can change into a hyena at whim, allowing them to conceal their identity. And in many cases, they believe that this were hyena inherits this through a patrilineal, like the father's lineage. So this is a genetic thing, right? Not too far off from werewolves, right? In Haiti, you have the loup-garou, which can change into anything, both plant and animal. Another kind of lore, another kind of mythic being, or what we interpret as a mythic being. So usually this figure of the loup-garou is used to inspire obedience and fear. So a lot of these stories, we can see it from the perspective of creating monsters to scare children for reasons of obedience. Fantasy, right? It's no wonder that we still to this day feed our children, stories of witches and ogres and, all these kinds of things. So here's a similar case. This loup-garou is what the elders would tell the children. And you have other, variations of the story, like a wolf-like beast that would kill, Christians who do not follow the rules of Lent. I mean, it always serves a kind of cultural purpose. It's not necessarily to state that it actually exists, that this is actually believed. You can kind of liken it to the Santa Claus mythos, right? Lore. In Iceland, you have something that is a kind of were creature. This one can shift into any animal that it's recently eaten. This, by popular culture, has similarities to how, again, popular culture depicts the Wendigo, the Native American Wendigo. But the Wendigo is a whole nother story. I don't want to get into that. And in Russia, or I mean in India, we have the Rakshasa, or the Raghosh, which is yet again a shifter, a shapeshifter, a skinwalker, who can change into any animal it wants, and is usually characterized by a big stature, and the color of the hair has to be red or blonde. So you see, each culture is being particular with this, right? They're making a use of this in their own way. And then you have something that I discussed in the snake mythology talk, the Naga, or these are snakes that can take human form, or vice versa, right? I mean, hey, in Indonesia, you have the Lik, or the Liek, which is a spirit that shapeshifts into humans, animals, or objects, and will cause mishaps, death, illness, havoc. So that one kind of takes the shape of a goblin in some kind of ways. A lot of these names I'm not going to try to pronounce. I'm just proving to you how far-reaching these concepts go. So in Norway and Sweden, we have another figure that can change into a wolf by wearing a wolf skin. So this is more literal, and this is where Norway and Sweden are more true to the source, where like with the natives and with shamans, you see them in the ceremonies, they wear the pelt, the skin of the actual animal when they're dancing the animal. So this one is a direct nod to that you can change into a wolf if you wear the wolf skin. Again, Norway and Sweden, you have this concept of those who can change voluntarily into werewolves. This goes deep into that kind of Scandinavian lore. In another case, you have a magical belt that can do this too. I mean, you've got all elements of creativity variating this here. And lastly, the one that I want to mention, which I'm going to go much further in on, is in South America, there is what is called the Kanema, or the Kayanama, which is a jaguar shaped spirit that seeks to kill, murders in particular. So this were jaguar is what I want to focus on. And this is something where we can all learn something new. It might seem like I'm going off a bit, but I want to talk about the Olmecs. The Olmecs, so O-L-M-E-C. The Olmecs were the pre-Mayan, pre-Aztec culture of Mesoamerica. They're very mysterious. There's a lot of open questions in regards to the Olmec, what they were on about, what they did. And the estimate puts them roughly between 1200 BC to 400 BC. And this is a civilization that was all around, but focused in the Gulf Coast. Now, there were all manner of what you'd expect in a civilization, right? You've got merchants, you've got warriors, you've got leaders, you've got farmers. And as with the kind of trope of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs inexplicably disappeared. That's one of the mysteries. It's kind of got a Roanoke vibe to it. Now, what I want to focus on about the Olmec is that there are tremendous indications of a priest class or a shaman class who acted as in between or intermediaries between the spirits or gods and the people. So this is interesting because it's bleeding into the topic that I want to touch on, the move from shamanism to religion. So I say a priest class, right? So the Olmec believed in what exactly as I described at the beginning, 3 tiers of existence: the middle realm or the physical realm, the upper realm, home of the gods, of the intellectual spirits, and the underworld or the lower realm or the animal realm, right? And this culture managed to make these full-time priests, where their sole dedication was to this role. So we're starting to see this early form religion in the Olmec, where it's not just that the village has a shaman, it's that it's now codified into a cultural mechanism where they are the ones to ordain, right? So there are, when it comes to details of the Olmec, you have what could be the bones of toads that have been excavated to suggest hallucinogenic or visionary ceremonies. You have the bones of stingrays that they believe were used for bloodletting and blood rituals, which we'll kind of go over that later and how that plays into the context of history. And I want to say too, while I'm on this topic, that if one is to take a tremendous dose of any plant medicine, whether they're licking a toad or what have you, if you are deep in that experience, many testimonies will say that a person literally experiences what it's like to be a rock, a plant, an animal. They literally experience that as if their soul has transmigrated. So that plays in, yet again, plays into this shape-shifting motif that I'm illustrating here. So anyhow, rulers in the Olmec culture were considered to have a special relationship with the divine, the gods, the spirits. They earned this through their shamanic, well-versedness. And this is how we can see how the beginnings of kingship came to be. The kings originally earned their stay through how spiritually sound they were, and that's what made them earn kingship. The mistake was when it became a matter of heretical lines, right? Heritage. And when it wasn't about spirituality anymore, it was about sheer inheritance. That's where we see not only religion falter, but also kingship. So instead of being a tremendously woke person, you just are shoveled in there as if you are. And as if, not to mention all the riches that come along with that to convolute the pool. So from the Olmec is where we get this original were-jaguar. They believe so scholars believed that there was a myth between a copulation between a jaguar and a woman. And this is where modern interpretations are tremendously foolish. It's well established that this is a very shamanic-centric culture. So thus again, I repeat, think of the shamanic journey. The jaguar would have been especially notable to the Olmec people from where they lived, to imbibe the ferocity, the warriorness, the courage, the strength of the jaguar would have been not a matter of like the worship that we might be familiar with, but something to emulate, right? So these depictions were just that, right? Depictings. So when I keep bringing up werewolves, jaguars, hyenas, we're using English to discern this, right? And the old English term were means man. So when I'm saying werewolf, I'm saying man wolf. When I say jaguar, I'm saying man jaguar. You get the point. The trope here that I'm teasing at, and it's kind of like obvious, right? So this, I have to discuss werewolves. And again, we're dealing with a culture that's looking at its most ferocious predator of the area, and that becomes this emulation of what we should shapeshift into, you see? So the werewolf at night, it devours animals, people, corpses, whatever, right? And the werewolf mythos is that a werewolf would do the same, but they return to human form by day, right? So in variations of the story as it moved through time and lore, right, and storytelling, werewolves can change shape at will. Sometimes they can only change shape by influence of the full moon. This thought pattern nowadays is considered a psychiatric condition. They call it lycanthropy, which lycanthropy is literally Greek for lycos, which is wolf, and anthropos, which is man. So again, it's like werewolf. It's literally meaning lycanthropy is just Greek for wolf man. And thus werewolf. And this idea of the full moon changing the werewolf. And I want to reiterate, this is just as mundane as the original shamanism shape-shifting, okay? The full moon trope comes about by the fact that the full moon was understood very differently back in the day than it's understood now. But to make it quick and simple for us, lunatic. To say you're a lunatic, luna, the craziness of the moon, right? Madness of the moon, lunatic, or lunacy, the moon, right? The full moon's ability to alter the internal experiences of all creatures, including humans. And especially in older times, you can imagine the mystique and the spiritual susceptibility that the full moon could have, especially with the mutual belief amongst cultures, right? So the moon would be something very notable, very mysterious, very you don't know what's coming kind of a thing. And with that mystique, it would play great into children's stories about fearing the werewolf. And two, I want to mention, like I said before, if you bark like a dog for days, you're all on all fours for days, you will believe that you're a dog. So when shamans or whoever is shape-shifting, they don't maintain this form, It's like when your mom would say as a kid, if you always make that face, it will stick to you. You use it and then you let it go. Or you don't use it. You have a relationship with it and you let it go. And so if somebody were to chronically impose a animal spirit, a shapeshift, a skin walking upon themselves, it might just lead to a certain type of psychosis. So there might be literal times where this actually happened to somebody through habit, through conditioning, through ritual, and chronic belief that this was an actual phenomena. But to say that they literally like took fur out of their skin and crawled out of this transformation that as it's depicted in movies, no. So these types of thoughts are most likely in cultures that believe in transmigration of the souls or believe in reincarnation, you know, that I was a wolf spirit in my last life or whatever. With these open-ended and spiritually savvy ideas, these things are going to be a natural consequence of this mentality. And I hope at no point do I make any of these I want to exemplify, I want to humanize. I don't want to talk down any cultures. I don't want any belittling of cultures. What I want is for people to understand that the ancients are not, you can look at these old depictions and think that they're foolish, but this is not the case whatsoever. You need to understand where it's coming from. So this trope of a were hyena, a werewolf, a were jaguar, I mean, you apply that same thing when it comes to a bear or a wolf in Asia or Europe. You apply that same thing to a leopard or a hyena when you're talking about Africa. You're applying it to a were tiger when it comes to India, Japan, or China, or elsewhere in Asia, right? So this is always the trope. The most predatory animal, the apex predator, is something to emulate, and that's it, full stop. Okay, so to continue, I need to go off a little bit, and what I need to talk about now is the chimeras. So a chimera, by classical definition, and I'll define it in how we understand it now later, but a chimera was in Greek mythology, okay? The word chimeria was the name of a mythical fire-breathing creature. This creature had a lion's head, a goat's body, and a dragon's tail. So this is one of the many historical depictions of a kind of crossbreeded entity, creature, that like in Ezekiel's vision, where he's seeing the cherubim and it has the four faces, you know, one of an eagle, one of a bull, so on. This is that same thing. Allegory, people. Allegory. Learn their language. Don't think that they believe these things literally exist as they're depicted, okay? So when it comes to the chimera, we have a very similar word, kema, which means the winter. So you could suppose, you could believe that this is a personification and embodiment of the winter. And if we want to kind of dissect this a little bit, you know, if you're freezing or if you get cold very quickly, frostbitten, it burns. It feels like fire, fire breathing, okay? With the goat's body, that would be a reference to how they understand Capricorn, persistence, determination. It goes, it is hard, fast. It is hard, cold, and doing. Like the goat's body, see, you're dissecting it allegorically. And the dragon's tail is the unforgivingness, you know, the slipperiness. You see it? Come on, people, right? So, I mean, you could also take this word and apply it in other ways. Like they could have it could have been an allegory for lava, for a volcano. So, you know, this is just to say that I'm not trying to tell you what the truth is per se. I'm trying to get you in this mind. So now we understand the word chimera as any grotesque monster. This is the definition. Any grotesque monster formed from parts of other animals, like Frankenstein style. But this trope of a fire-breathing lion or chimeric entity goes to ancient Egypt. You have the god Sekhmet. You have the god Wadjet, which I've mentioned before in the course. Both of them are chimeras. The Egyptian gods were depicted as chimeric. To understand what they were, they had to use the symbolism of the particular animal parts to hint towards something that is incorporeal, that we can all understand, but it doesn't have a physical form. So you're using symbolism to understand it. For example, right, the winter. The winter does have a mundane physical form, you know, snow on the fields, but the essence of it, that could be represented through this type of symbolism. Okay? So with the Egyptian gods, it's not that they literally believe that they looked like this, it's that you have to look at it allegorically, symbolically. So not just them, but you also see these kind of chimeric forms in the Etruscan civilization. You see it in all sorts of archaic art. You see it in wall paintings from years and years ago, and from as soon as like the early BCs into the Greeks, into the Romans. But what I want to talk about a little bit here too is another one of these kind of motifs, which is the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is this human head mixed with a falcon, a cat, a sheep, body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, right? And to understand the Sphinx, we have to understand the culture that made the Sphinx, right? So here's where I have to mention the procession of the equinox a little bit. This Sphinx was allegedly made between 11,000 years ago and 8,000 years BC. So not 11,000 years ago, but 11,000 BC, in between to 8,000 BC. This is the astrological age of Leo. Right now we're in the astrological age of Pisces, moving towards Aquarius, right? So the ancients knew this. This is how they talked about things. The ages, the age of the bull, the age of the ram, the age of Leo. This was the age of Leo. So you can interpret the Sphinx's body being that of a lion as an embodiment or as a symbol of the age, a testament to all that was built around it, that all of this that was built around the Sphinx and the Sphinx itself is an embodiment, a depiction of the age, which the age itself is incorporeal. You are putting a symbolic representation of it in stone. Okay? Now, when it comes to older references of what the Sphinx was, you have this guy, Apollodorus. He describes the Sphinx as a woman's face, the body and tail of a lion, and the wings of a bird. So the wings of a bird would mean that it's a high aspiration, that it's involving the divine. Eagle wings, bird wings were always a representation of a movement towards the divine. The body of a lion, again, is about the age, and a woman's face is this kind of feminine aspect. So we're speaking the language of the ancients here. I think it's Pliny the Elder mentions that there were plenty of Sphinx depictions in Ethiopia where they had brown hair and breasts. Sometimes they had the wings of an eagle, and sometimes it had the tail of a serpent. I'm not going to get into trying to dissect this symbolic interpretation more. I think you understand the point without me just belaboring. So, across the world, I've displayed several cultures that all have the same tropes. Whether it's, a chimera, a werewolf, a were-jaguar, centaurs, griffins, gorgons, unicorns, all of these things could be understood as ancient religious iconography. And by iconography, I mean symbolism, not literalism. And you see all these examples of depictions of gods in the form of chimeras or crossbreeded animals, Frankenstein style. And all of this, here's my claim. I know I'm kind of stepping out on a leg here. All of this has a root in shamanic skinwalking, shape-shifting, okay? It's all it's originated in exactly that, like we were discussing at the beginning of this talk. So a question here is, how did this phenomena of skinwalking get so confused and various? Well, not necessarily confused. How did it get so various throughout the world and throughout the ages? How did it blend into all these stories, into all these different religions? How did these more mundane practices become the institutional religions that we see today? You know, how did this become like Islam or like Christianity? I mean, how did this story unfold? Where did it move from, right? And this is a tricky topic, I know. So with that in mind, I think it's worth us diving back into the mind, the mentality of the pre-religious shaman before the Olmec, before the Sumerians, before any priest class, before the pantheons, before anything that resembles any of that. And to do this, we have to first talk about the relationship between healing and death. I know this seems off, but follow with me. The relationship between the medicine man and what he does. The original spirituality, okay? So we have to re-enter that mind of nature-centricism, where there is no division between you and the natural world. Everything is beneficent. It's all beneficial. It's all playing into itself perfectly. There are no divisions. That's the important part, okay? Now, there is a belief in this mentality, which I believe is just as true now as it's ever been, that there is a plant remedy for every disease, that the world provides the remedy for every disease, and that as a native, as a human being, I should say, you were dedicated to respecting this, that you would be gifted with such a thing, right, for your ailment. And so it's customary that you give back to the land if you're taking something from the land. So in certain tribes, this would take the form of giving tobacco to whatever plant that you're taking from. This is why tobacco was sacred. But in many other cases, you would give blood. You would drop blood if you were to take a plant. This is, I'll give, it's a give and take. So this is very different than the modern take, right? You got to give to get, right? It's respecting. And in this culture, if you had things wrong with you, there was several things that would be done, really, other than knowing these plants to a genius degree, mind you. And this included fasting, you know. If you needed to cleanse yourself out, you would fast. Oftentimes in ritual, there would be use of all manner of bodily secretions. This is where we start to get into the magic end of things and why pagan rituals involve secretions, you know, blood, urine, semen, you know, sometimes mixed with roots, you know, different plants and salts and the like. And oftentimes these concoctions were cooked up by the shaman or whoever, because the belief was that diseased spirits, you know, bad juju, badness, could only be driven out of the body by terrible tasting things or just terribly stinky things. So this is reminiscent of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a terrible drink. It tastes terrible. And this requires whoever takes it to purge, to puke. And that is the way of expelling badness, you know. They call it disease spirits, but, you know, this would be what a more contemporary word would just be detoxing. So purging would be a part of this medicine regime. And this is how the discoveries of, you know, certain medicines came into play, you know, quinine or raw cacao, or using the willow tree's bark to treat headaches. I mean, all these things before pharmaceutical took it way away from its roots were of the genius knowledge of the natives with their environment. Another way of treating these sicknesses would be sweating, vapors, heat, high heat, boiling things out. Another way of getting rid of bad spirits, bad juju, right? And so this is where we get the sacredness of hot springs or the sweat lodge. The sweat lodge, not only as a ceremonial ground, but as a healing place, okay? And this is still true to this day. To relieve pain is to use heat. People have heated pillows, you know? So you could use all sorts of manner to create this with any primitive tools. I hate using that word here. So you could use the sunlight. You could use hot clay. You could use hot stones. You know, any and all methods that you could were used. And then rhythm. Rhythm was a way of influencing the spirits, you know? And when you say spirits, it's changing your mind. It's changing how you feel. It's changing your mentality. If you've been stuck in a room all day and you're feeling all groggy, just imagine if you're pushed into being in the sunlight and you're supposed to groove around and dance at a show. That's going to change your mind. That's going to influence the spirits. You see the translation here? And in which case, the drums were ubiquitous. The drums were a tremendous part of this. So also massage. Massage was a way of rubbing the bad spirits out of a person, or, you know, the sick mind. Massage will relieve you, you see? It's so much more mundane than people make it, man. So massage would be partnered with incantations, as we call it, you know, chanting, howling, breathing techniques. This was all done to put people at ease. So these were all ways that one could be healed. And you notice how holistic it feels. It's very wholesome. It's very simple in a certain, in a tremendously good way. And you know, if you're digging this far back too, you also see, you know, excavated cases of them knowing the art of trepanning a skull, you know, digging a hole into the head. And there's a number of cases where they have to do this to relieve a brain that's hemorrhaging. And the shamans were also tremendously sophisticated at midwifery. They could treat broken bones by binding them, treat dislocations. Everything that could go wrong with you has a medicine. Okay, so this all feels like everything was taken care of, right? And that's why I bring up this question: why move to religiosity from here? If you have all this spirituality, and you have all this healing, and you have all this medicine, why move to religion? Why create mythos? Why create anything other than what reality is and presents? Okay, so this is where we start to get into the philosophy of this time period of ancient history. So modern people will deal with their physical discomforts directly. So if you want something, you build it. You know, it's that kind of mentality. It's direct. Whereas the ancient mind was focused on the ability to affect the energies of the physical domain. So it's not about jumping straight to the thing. It's about the energies. And this is why it was tremendously important to honor the spirits, to honor the ancestors, because you're paying attention to the root of material existence, not just material existence itself. You're not just trapped in the material existence. So in this way of honoring the spirits, of honoring the ancestors, you are concerned with gaining favor or support of these divine entities, right? And in this case, you might devolve into superstition over time. They like this, they don't like this. So that's one way that this kind of would eventually come to downfall. Now, all the efforts of the shaman of this early spirituality was about ensuring your health and prolonging life. It was now centric. It didn't turn itself towards the afterlife like we like to fixate in religion now. It was about living your best life here. And we are still interested in prolonging life and ensuring health. That will always be true. So the idea, though, is that death and disease, these things are brought on by spirits that wish for your soul to join them, to exit the body. So the act of living people is to ward off these spirits from taking your spirit with them. It wasn't necessarily, death wasn't necessarily something to be feared. They knew it as an eventuality, but they wished to maintain your embodiment for its full duration, for its full effect, as any of us naturally would. And with this in mind, if somebody was sick, they knew that illness, disease, these spirits would spread. So when somebody was real sick, they would isolate them, which sounds, right now this recording's happening during COVID-19. So this is the same thing, social isolation, mask up. So they did this. They knew this. We've always known this is the point. Now, only later do we see like the Chinese and the Mesopotamians think of disease and death as the action of evil demons, in particular demons. And the Chaldeans believed that suffering was because of the movement of the stars. And then, the other aspect of cultures believing in the divine wrath, something against us personally. So we start to see here that the ideas of why disease and death are happening start to variate as people spread out. So that's the other thing, is that we kind of lost that central philosophy, even if it's wrong. And I don't think any of it's wrong, but even if it's wrong, to maintain that would have maintained a simplicity to life, right? And the variation came when we spread out and started to differ about why disease happens, why death happens. So not only the superstition, like I noted before, but now these differing concepts on why these things happen. These are the two things that are leading towards religiosity. So with this, and building cities, and mixed with this too, and by the way, building cities was just simply a means of us achieving a greater sense of comfort, right? So with that considered too, also we have to keep in mind what ritual is, right? Ritual was to appease these spirits. And I was saying that it divulged into superstition, and that's exactly what it is. If the ritual is done faulty, then the spirits won't support you, or the resentment of the gods will ensue, the wrath of the gods, right? And this is where that fickleness comes in, right? That it needs to be a particular type of way, right? This ritual needs to be a specific type of way. And so as it started to be more specific and more specific, it went through entropy. And then rituals became overly convoluted and overly particular. And this is why you needed a priest class, a class of people who were entrusted with simply just orchestrating these overly complex rituals. And this is where you start to divide the people from their own spirituality. Now it's not that everybody's in on it. Now it's just for that class of people, and the rest of everybody can just go on doing whatever else, right? So there's that divide, and that plays into religiosity, right? So these rituals have been the same throughout all of time, right? It's about dancing, it's about singing, it's about prayer, it's about ritual. And every religion, I don't care which one we're talking about, every one of them keeps true to this ritual, which that would be a whole nother talk, you know, a ritual interpretation of many religions. I might just have to do that soon. Anyway, and with this creation of the overly complex ritual and this divide between the people, then you are also deciding what words are sacred. For instance, Salah or Amen, right? And since you are deciding that certain words are now sacred, it's only natural that certain words are sacrilegious or not sacred. And here's where we get the invention of swear words, you see? Profanity. So the religious makes the sacrilegious here, you know? This is the kind of tumble road that we've put ourselves on in this regard. You know, you are defaming that which is divine. And as with always, you know, sacred shrines, purification, cleansing, sanctification, this ground is holy, this one is not holy. And this is where we went wrong, because before, everything was sacred. Everything was sacred. But then with this divide, now the priest class only worships in certain places, right? It has to be done here. This is the sacred place, which by implication means all other places aren't sacred. And I'm not arguing that some places aren't special. Some places are especially notable, but I'm saying the divide between these things was taken entirely too far. And this is what has sent us down the road of confusion. Okay? So the priests here would also start to specialize. So you'd have certain ones that were dedicated diviners or oracles, certain ones that were dedicated to dancing, certain ones that were dedicated to singing, certain ones for weather making, for calling for rain, certain ones for guarding certain sacred relics or certain sacred places, you know, fortune tellers. I mean, here it is, right? So now you're introducing a type of not just speciality, which is natural to a certain extent, but then it will bleed its way down into bureaucracy and devoidedness from its original wellspring of creation, inspiration. And eventually all these roles and priesthood would become hereditary and would become so far from where it was that it's unrecognizable, which we're seeing with modern religion over and over. I mean, criticizing what the church did during the Middle Ages, all these things are perfect examples of how far devoid the priest class has become from the actual religion itself, or the actual fundamental ideals and beliefs. So, for instance, you know, if you ask anybody who's left a church, you know, who's there their whole life, if you ask anyone, it wasn't that they disbelieved the words of Jesus or disbelieved the words of a certain prophet or what have you. What they walked away from was the priest class, the religiosity, people doing wrong with it, being so far from what it is meant to be. Ego, self-aggrandization, you name it, depravity, pervertedness, you name it. It's never about the thing in itself, right? That's worth paying attention to. So it's in losing this original spirituality, devoiding it. The act of the ritual is not the thing. It's an act. It's become divorced from the thing, you see? So, then throughout the ages, as religion has now developed in this framework that I'm telling you, they needed to impress people. They needed to awe people because they needed to maintain their power. They needed to maintain their hold. And mind you, the priest class is on top of ancient societies. So to impress them, what would you do? You do all sorts of magical things, right? Magical things to mystify them, right? And this would take several forms. But the one that's most relatable to us is by using an ancient tongue. If you use an old religion, if you speak an old religion, that's magical. Ooh, they're special. And you still see this in pagan ceremonies, you know, when you see depictions of supernatural stuff, they're speaking Greek and Latin. And mind you, being that I know some of it, their pronunciations are horrible. But it's all to bedazzle, right? Ooh, because if they're gonna say that ritual in English, it just, you know, it just doesn't have that same mystifying effect. Because again, this is substitution for the real thing. It's not the thing anymore. And mind you, too, while I'm on the topic, if we're talking about academics, if we're talking about people creating words of sophistication, you know, if it's English or Old English, that doesn't quite sound that fancy. But if they're using Greek or Latin terms, you know, that come from Latin or Greek etymology, ooh, now they are pontificators, you know. What's eloquence, right? It's the same bait and switch mystique, you know, that's nothing more than a kind of wave of the hands, you see. And it all bleeds back to the religious leaders needing to impress the people for the purpose of maintaining their power, their grandiosity, okay? So here's where I start to break it down. I'll come to a close. There is a distinction between true religious leaders and priests. And I'm not dogging on all priests. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not throwing them all out with the bathwater, right? I'm saying there's a distinction between someone who is the real deal and someone who wants to be a big deal. That should be heavily noted. There is a distinction between spirituality and religiosity. The most important note here is that spirituality is individual. It is for all people. This was our mistake. This is what has led us to such confusion. This is what has led us far away from the simplicity that we desire. This substitution for the real thing, this religiosity, this entitlement, this classism. It's classism. And I have to say, too, that this concept of neo-shamanism, you know, what shamanism is today, is not neo. It's not new. The shamanism that you most often see today is like true ancient shamanism, the OG shamanism, the spirituality before all spirituality, the non-religious, the no specific pantheon, the no hard set rules, and the no hierarchy, and the importance of being good here and now and being a part of nature and transacting with it, not ripping away from it, but transacting from it, with it, having a relationship with it. This is the OG spirituality, okay? So now that we understand how this trajectory has unfolded over time from spirituality to religion, we can understand this matter and mystery of these mythical beasts, these chimeras, the hydra, the minotaur, Medusa, the nagas, on and on and on, that in all these cases, now, and I don't want to throw them all under the rug. Some of them have more mystery to be unfolded. I don't want you to think that, you know, or for me, I definitely don't think that I have completely dispelled everything there is to say about this subject. By no means. But in many, if not all cases, these are symbols. These are allegories that have been created from the differentiation, the variation of different cultures and their own local language, their own local know-how, their own esoteric understandings. We ought not look at those who speak another language as stupid. That is stupid. What we need to do is understand the language that is being spoken, which it all comes from the initial language, but that's another point. So all of these variations of iconography are rooted in shapeshifting, as is in the OG shamanism, in the skinwalking, of embodying the animal. See how we come full circle? The attributes, the spirits of the many animals are tropes for understanding phenomena in the world. A beast that represents the true essence of a storm, or like a leviathan being a symbol or an embodiment of the primordial chaos before the earth was created. A serpent would be a perfect image for this, for the primordial chaos, that is, because it's mysterious, it's enigmatic, it doesn't have legs, that's weird to us. It's enigmatic, and it sheds its skin, and this speaks of birth and death. And so the initial substance of the universe, of course, this speaks of birth and death, like the snake does, right? Great symbol. It's humble, it's shameless, and it's got this ominousness to it. It's got this wisdom to it that's very foreign to us. These are all great attributes that fit with the concept of the primordial chaos, and that just so happen to fit with the snake. Thus we call it Leviathan, Tiamat, so on, so on, so on. This is the confusion, the variation, and the divorce from the initial meaning of what it was actually on about. So, in closing, the ancient world is riddled with this kind of imagery, and it's foolish to think that these animalistic depictions are literal. And this is simply a calling to learn the language of the ancients. Meet them where they're at. That's where we're going to get the wisdom that we're looking for in this great renaissance that we're experiencing.